Charles Rogers was 3 hours into a routine fence check when a sound cut through the quiet canyons of southern Utah. It was sharp and full of pain, the kind of sound that made his heart race. He pulled his gelding, Copper, to a stop and listened again. This was not wind moving through the red rocks or a hawk circling above. This was the scream of a horse fighting for its life. At 54 years old, Charles had heard horses cry in fear, in anger, and in joy, but this sound was different. It was raw and desperate, echoing off the canyon walls in a way that made his skin tighten. Something was wrong, and it was close to Willow Creek, a rugged place where wild mustangs roamed, and where an old wooden bridge crossed a deep ravine. One mistake in that area could mean disaster. Charles did not waste time. He nudged Copper forward, pushing through brush and twisted juniper trees. The November sun was sinking, and he knew daylight was running out. Whatever horse was screaming needed help now. As he got closer, the screaming stopped. The silence only made him more worried. A hurt horse that went silent was usually in worse danger than one fighting loudly. Then Charles climbed a small rise and saw the bridge. It had been built long before he was born, back when his grandfather moved cattle across this land. The old planks had been rotting for years. Charles had planned to tear it down someday, but he never imagined anything would try crossing it now. Something had, and it had gone terribly wrong. A young Mustang stallion was trapped inside the broken bridge. Charles stopped breathing for a moment when he saw the situation. The horse had fallen through the rotten boards near the middle of the span. His front half rested on the deck while his hind legs dangled over open air. Sharp, splintered planks pressed into his sides. Rusty nails stuck out in every direction. The Mustang's coat was a rare silver dun that seemed to glow under the fading light. Dark stripes marked his legs, and a bold line ran down his back. He was beautiful, even in this nightmare. Blood streaked his sides where wood had ripped into him. His breathing was fast and hard. Every time he tried to climb out, more boards cracked beneath him. When the stallion saw Charles, he screamed again and thrashed. The whole bridge shook. The horse dropped lower, and Charles feared the entire structure would collapse and send the Mustang crashing to the rocks 15 feet below. He dismounted slowly, careful not to startle the wild horse further. This was not a trained ranch horse that might trust a human in trouble. This was a wild Mustang, born free, full of instinct and fear. One wrong move could get Charles hurt. But leaving the horse would mean certain death. He stepped onto the edge of the bridge and tested the boards. They creaked under his weight. Some were so rotten he could push a finger through them. The stallion watched him with wide, terrified eyes, his muscles trembling with panic. "Easy, son," Charles said softly. His voice stayed calm even though his heart was pounding. "I'm not here to hurt you." The Mustang laid his ears flat, warning him to stay back. But he didn't thrash again, and that small pause gave Charles hope. He circled the bridge, studying the angles, trying to see a way out. The horse was wedged between broken beams. A thick support beam ran under his belly, holding part of his weight but trapping him. Blood dripped from a sharp board pressing into his shoulder. If Charles could free some of those boards, maybe the horse could pull himself forward. He knew he needed help. He walked to Copper and pulled out his satellite phone. Regular cell service did not reach these canyons, but the sat phone always worked. He called Larry, his foreman. "Larry, get the equipment truck to the old Willow Creek Bridge. Bring every strap, rope, winch, everything we've got." "Charles," Larry said, "that bridge is dangerous. What happened?" "There's a wild Mustang trapped. Bad. If we don't get him out soon, he'll die." Larry hesitated. "Maybe call BLM. They do this kind of rescue." "They'll take too long. We have daylight now. That's all we've got." Larry finally agreed and promised to come fast. While waiting, Charles knew he could not just stand there. The horse was bleeding and trapped. He crawled carefully toward the sharp board stuck in the stallion's shoulder. The horse tensed, but he did not fight. Charles took his pocket knife and worked at the board, cutting the splintered wood away piece by piece. When the board snapped free, blood flowed faster, but the pressure on the wound eased. The horse let out a tired breath. Minutes dragged by. Charles kept talking softly to him. The stallion watched him with wild eyes, but something in his gaze slowly changed. He was still scared, but he was no longer fighting blindly. Finally, Charles heard an engine approaching. Larry had arrived with 2 ranch hands, Miguel and Tom. They stepped out, saw the trapped stallion, and all 3 men fell silent. It was worse than anyone expected. "Well," Larry said, "this is going to be one hell of a job." Charles nodded. "But we're getting him out." The men gathered ropes, winches, and lumber. The sun was dropping fast. The clock was running. And one wild Mustang's life hung in the balance. The cold air settled deeper into the canyon as the sun slipped lower behind the red cliffs. Shadows stretched long across the broken bridge, and the trapped Mustang trembled with exhaustion. There was no time to lose. If they waited too long, darkness would make the rescue impossible, and the stallion would not survive the night. Larry and the 2 ranch hands studied the scene from every angle. Miguel crossed himself when he saw how deeply the horse was wedged between the broken beams. Tom shook his head slowly. "This is the worst kind of trap," Larry said. "One wrong pull and the whole structure drops." Charles already knew that. His eyes stayed fixed on the stallion, who had stopped screaming but was breathing in sharp, painful bursts. The horse was scared, tired, and bleeding, yet still fighting to stay alive. They began rigging ropes and straps across the bridge beams, building a web of support to keep the old structure from giving way. The portable winch was hooked to a secure anchor point, and Copper, Charles's gelding, stood steady and calm even with the strange smells and tension in the air. Copper always seemed to understand when something was serious. The most dangerous job was placing the straps under the stallion's body. Those straps were the only way to lift the horse's weight once they cut the beam beneath him. Without them, he would fall straight through the bridge. Miguel stepped forward without hesitation. "I'm the smallest. I'll do it." Charles wanted to argue, but he knew Miguel was right. A heavier man would break the boards instantly. "Move slow," Charles said. "Test every step." Miguel nodded and stepped onto the bridge. Each board groaned under his weight. Some cracked softly as he crossed them. The Mustang watched with wide, fearful eyes, muscles tight and ready to lash out, but exhaustion kept him still. "Easy, boy," Miguel whispered. "We're here for you." He slid the first strap under the horse's chest. Charles held his breath as the stallion flinched but did not fight. Tom grabbed the end of the strap and secured it. Miguel placed the second strap under the horse's barrel. The stallion let out a low groan but held still. The third strap was the hardest. Miguel had to reach under the beam that trapped the horse's belly. One wrong move, and the Mustang could crush his hand with one shift of weight. Snow-white fear lined Miguel's face, but he kept working until he finally called out, "Got it!" He crawled backward off the bridge, every movement careful. When he reached solid ground again, Charles let out a slow breath he didn't realize he had been holding. All the straps were in place. Now came the part everyone feared. "Take up the slack," Larry said. Tom started the winch. The straps tightened, lifting a small amount of weight from the broken bridge. The horse felt the pull and panicked. He thrashed until the straps held him securely, then stood trembling, too tired to fight. The bridge creaked dangerously, but it held. "Now we cut that beam," Larry said. "Once it's gone, we lift him, and he pulls forward with everything he has." Quote, he grabbed the chainsaw. The moment he pulled the starter cord, the roaring sound echoed through the canyon. The Mustang screamed and shook his head wildly, but Charles stepped closer, staying just out of range of the horse's hooves. "Listen to me," Charles said in a calm, steady voice. "When that beam falls, you're going to feel yourself drop, but the straps will hold you. Use your front legs. Pull forward. Fight. I know you can do this." The Mustang stared at him with dark, intelligent eyes. In that moment, Charles felt something pass between them. Trust. Thin and fragile, but real. Larry set the chainsaw blade against the beam. The bridge shook with every vibration of the saw. Wood chips flew. The sound was deafening. The beam was thick and old. It took long minutes to cut through. Then, with a loud crack that echoed like a gunshot, the beam snapped. The bridge dropped. The Mustang fell with it. The straps caught. "Bull, pull him up!" Larry shouted. Tom tightened the winch. The straps lifted the stallion's body as the bridge continued to collapse under him. Charles moved closer, urging the horse. "Pull forward!" he shouted. "Fight! You're almost there!" The Mustang dug his front hooves into the broken deck. His muscles bunched. He heaved himself forward, inch by inch. Boards broke beneath him, falling into the ravine with loud crashes, but he kept climbing. Larry increased the lift. Miguel and Tom steadied the ropes. Every man held his breath. With a final, desperate surge, the stallion lifted his hind legs clear of the gap. His hooves hit solid ground. He stumbled, caught himself, and stood shaking, bleeding, and alive. For a long moment he stared at Charles. No fear, no anger, just a calm, quiet understanding. Then the Mustang lifted his head, snorted once, and trotted away into the open desert, limping but free. The men watched him disappear into the dusk. "That," Larry said softly, "is something I'll never forget." None of them would. 4 years later, that moment returned to save Charles's life in a way no one could ever explain. 4 years passed, and the memory of the silver-dun Mustang slowly faded into the rhythm of ranch life. Charles still thought about him sometimes, usually when he spotted wild horses moving across the far ridges. He wondered if the stallion was out there leading a band of mares, or if he had forgotten the day a group of men pulled him back from the edge of death. Life carried on. Seasons changed. The Rogers Ranch stayed busy as always. Charles, now 58, was slower than he used to be, but still strong and steady. The land depended on him, and he showed up every day. On a cold January afternoon, he drove into town to pick up supplies. The trip was simple and familiar, the kind he had made hundreds of times. But by the time he loaded the truck and headed home, the sky had turned heavy and gray. Snow began to fall in small flakes, then thick ones, until it became a full whiteout. The dirt road home vanished under blowing snow. The wind pushed hard against the truck, and the headlights only lit a swirling wall of white. Charles slowed to a crawl. He leaned forward, trying to follow the faint line of fence wire that marked the road. Then his tires hit ice. The truck slid sideways. Charles tried to correct the wheel, but it was too late. The pickup spun, went over the edge of a steep drop, rolled twice, and crashed onto its side with a violent jolt. Glass shattered, metal twisted. The world went silent except for the wind. Charles hung from his seatbelt in the dark. His wrist burned with sharp pain. His ribs ached with every breath. Snow blew through the broken windshield, filling the cab. He tried to reach his satellite phone, but it had been thrown somewhere during the crash. He tried yelling, but no human voice could travel through the storm. He was stuck, hurt, freezing, and alone. As minutes passed, the cold pushed deeper into his bones. His thinking grew slow. His hands shook so badly he could barely work the seatbelt. He knew the truth. If no one found him soon, he would not last the night. He thought of his wife, gone 6 years now. He wished she were there. He thought of the ranch and the people who would wonder where he was. He thought about small things, warm coffee, soft blankets, spring mornings. Then he heard a sound that made no sense. A horse call. At first he thought he imagined it, but then it came again. A strong call, clear and powerful, cutting through the storm. A shape appeared in the broken windshield. A horse stood there, snow sticking to his coat, breath steaming in the freezing air. Charles blinked hard, not believing what he saw. Silver dun coat, dark stripe down the back, strong neck, intelligent eyes that held an old memory. The Mustang. The same stallion he had freed from the broken bridge 4 years earlier. Older now, scarred, but unmistakable. "Hey there," Charles whispered through chattering teeth. "You remember me?" The stallion stepped closer. He lowered his head into the truck's opening until Charles could feel his warm breath against his face. The horse let out a soft, low sound. almost like he was reassuring him. Behind him, more horses appeared, a small band, mares, young ones, all nervous, but none left. The stallion pawed the snow near the truck. His hooves struck metal with a ringing crack. He pawed again and again. He was making noise, loud noise that could carry far through the storm. He was calling for help. The other Mustangs joined in, pawing and calling, filling the dark ravine with sound. Charles felt tears freeze on his cheeks. He was watching a wild Mustang do the impossible. A horse he had saved was now trying to save him. After nearly half an hour, the Mustang band suddenly went quiet. The stallion stared at Charles one last time, snorted softly, and led his band back into the storm. Charles drifted in and out of consciousness until headlights finally cut through the darkness. Voices called his name. Larry climbed down the ravine with two ranch hands, shaking as he brushed snow off Charles's coat. "Thank God," Larry breathed. "How did we find you out here?" Charles forced the words out. "How?" "We heard horses," Larry said. "A bunch of them calling and pawing at something. The sound carried through the storm. We followed it straight here. When we got close, the horses ran off, like they were leading us." Charles closed his eyes, a weak smile on his cold face. "Not horses. One horse." 2 weeks later, once he healed enough to move around, Charles rode out to the ravine. In the snow, he found hoof prints leading straight to the crash site, prints that came from miles away, from wild country trails no horse should have traveled in a storm. The silver stallion had come looking for him. Months passed. Charles returned to working the ranch. Sometimes he spotted wild bands running across the desert, and sometimes, just for a moment, he saw a silver dun coat among them. He never approached. He never tried to claim the horse. Some souls were meant to stay wild. But on still nights, when the moon hung full over the red cliffs, Charles would stand outside and listen. And sometimes, carried on the cold desert wind, he heard a familiar call, a strong, clear sound that made his heart tighten. A Mustang calling out across the land. A call that seemed to say, "I remember." And Charles would whisper into the night, "I remember too." The rancher who saved a wild Mustang, and the Mustang who returned the favor.